All right, everyone. Today, we are welcomed by Mr. Lorin Morgan Richards. He is a writer, animator. Am I missing anything else? Or
Illustrator.
illustrator? Sure, sure. Um, so is there any work that you've done that you think my students might have seen or worked with?
Yeah, so the big one would be the Goodbye Family, the animated
Mhm.
series that is broadcast streaming through Tubi, Apple
Mhm.
TV, and Roku. It does also have its first season through Amazon Prime. And recently, I put out a short film that ran through the festival circuit called Poor Poor Eldon. And it
Mhm.
was a short film that has won a few awards as it's went, and also premiered at the Beverly Hills Film Festival, which was quite an extraordinary event for me.
Mhm. Great. Where does your love of animation come from? Like, where do you start with animation? Where is your base?
Yeah. So early on, it was, as a child, is something like Saturday morning cartoons.
Mm.
Really young was Casper, if you remember
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
Heathcliff and the Cadillac
Heathcliff.
Cats, and
I
not so
remember
much
all that.
Heathcliff, but the Cadillac Cats were sort of a punk rock gang. I really enjoyed that.
Hmm.
Um, and then for stop motion animation, I was really into Gumby. Um,
Hmm.
and in school, I daydreamed a lot. I had dyslexia, so one way to cope with that was to doodle constantly. And I know sometimes doodling while you're listening can help focus for some people, but for me, it was just kind of going into whole different worlds and kind of seeing what I could create. For some reason, I always wanted to conceptualize worlds when I was creating things. So it'd be pretty
Hmm.
elaborate, almost like stage performances of characters and seeing how they would grow. And that, of course, led to comics that I would do, and with growth, then I was into Charles Adams and
Right. Yeah,
Edward
I'm a big Charles
Gorey.
Adams fan too.
Yeah. The absence of color growing up, I felt was around me. I grew up in Cleveland. It was always sort of gray skies and stuff like that. And just the mood that was sort of in me came out through a lot of just like black and white. And so I really, really honed to that. And then when I finally got around to creating my own content, it started off like that. And color was never really part of it.
Hmm.
But I did like how watercolor looked with pen and ink, and so then that grew to how the Goodbye Family looks.
Sure. Yeah, I did notice it did have kind of a watercolory kind of
Mhm.
appeal to it. Kind of, there was a lot of those old watercolors. Usually they were like a flowers, kind of reminded me
Mhm.
of that a little bit. Um, So, you have this love of illustration. For those of you who don't know, Charles Adams, whose work eventually, although he didn't do it specifically, created the Adams Family, both the live action, then the cartoon, and then the live action movie. So you're kind of a fan of his, and then some other actual animations. So where do you go from there?
As Okay, so then I partnered up with Angus Oblong at one point, who did the
Hmm.
Oblong series, and I did some shows with him around LA. And that kind of gave me another glimpse into the underground art movement that was here,
Hmm.
and just meeting other creators. As far as the universe of animation, um, I'm not too, is more of, I'd say, an outsider's look on it. It's almost like how Kurt Cobain learned guitar
Hmm.
through not the means of being taught. So I sort of had to pick up a platform like Toon Boom to get the
Hmm.
work done and really be able to figure out that tool. and
Mm,
see what I could do with it. So you see a lot of progression with the Goodbye Family in that way too. From the first episode, really raw, until the more recent stuff is really thought out, and it's like through the practice of it,
mm.
it's developed.
So I know you're an author. You wrote some short,
Mhm.
novels. Was it that you did the novels first and then wanted to animate it, or was it kind of both where you sort of were writing it and were seeing it as an animation, or like what was your process there? Like,
Yeah, I was invited to do a lecture about well, it was kind of like a creative lecture, and it was pretty open to whatever I wanted to do. So I wrote a story with illustration back in like 2008.
mhm.
That actually led to me focusing on writing and illustrating,
Okay.
and creating the company that I have, a Ravenbuff Press.
Hmm.
So that was in 2009. And ever since that time, I've put in my work out. I've released about 15 different comic collections of the Goodbye Family, and something I called the Noodle Rut, which
Hmm.
was more like contemporary comics. And then also just using the Raven Above Press to put out other things, novels. I'm working on my third novel,
Hmm.
and these are all within that same universe, though, too. So it's all part of what I call the Great Mountain series.
Okay.
And so it's really in this weird West world, where it started off with indigenous girl named Mima, and then has grown
Hmm.
into the Goodbye Family, which were the undertakers of that town,
Okay.
and then on. And the next novel is about Hollis Sorrow and Madeline Sage, who were characters in the first novel, and they kind of are these spirits that are trying to find out where they need to go next, and so
Okay.
they're going into different realms that have uncharted realms.
Interesting, interesting. And so take us through the process of you animating your series. Like, did you sort of animate it first and kind of, or animate an episode and kind of distribute it via YouTube or work the film circuit, or what was kind of, or did you sort of have kind of
Yeah.
a promise of like, oh, if you do this and you view it, someone might, will give you
Yeah.
a
I,
short series deal kind of thing?
Well, let me start by saying that I was trying to take my books to the next level, and
Mhm.
because promotion is one thing, but if you don't have the marketing for it, then
Sure, sure.
you're kind of like at a standstill. And so I thought the next best thing was to kind of branch out into animating the comics that I was doing.
Hmm.
And so what I did with those pen scratch, dark, gritty kind of comics is that I started researching, and I
Hmm.
one of the great ones that came up was Ivar the Engine, and a Welsh friend of mine,
Or the engine. Okay.
yeah, a Welsh friend of mine showed me this 1970s, 80s kids TV show.
Okay.
It was all that cut out puppet animation. So
Hmm.
I really wanted to try to take the comics and do something similar with that.
Hmm.
And first I tried Flash, and I wasn't too happy with the effects of that personally.
Okay.
And then I went into learning about Toon Boom. And Toon Boom,
Hmm.
you can do it freehand, but you can also use their puppet animation rigging. So you're actually taking, for instance, the character from the comic and cutting it out, and you're kind of, moving it along as the story goes.
Hmm.
Much of the Goodbye Family is more about the narrative and comedy, so much than something like adventure and action. So
Hmm.
big on like the Munsters, Addams Family TV show. It's really comedy and you know the punchlines and stuff like that. So it does well for me. And then, after I was able to find the program and start to work with it and learn it, I needed to find the voiceover actors. So I looked into the pool of people around me and asked around. I remember when I was working at a museum, a lady by the name of Nana, Nana Grace, she was very interested in animation. She watched a lot of Japanese anime, and she
Mhm.
wanted to kind of branch out and do this herself as a voiceover actor. So I remember she had a great voice, so she fit.
Like she was already doing anime
She
voiceovers?
wasn't, so
Oh,
this kind of gave her the chance to do that.
got it, got it.
And then, my immediate family fit some of the bills. So Orphe Goodbye is my daughter, Berlin
Oh,
Richards.
nice.
Um, and much of the reason is because Orphe is often inspired by my daughter's um, the way she is. Uh,
Okay.
I had my wife play Pyrodine, and that's the matriarch of the family, and I do Otis among
Hmm.
other characters. And then we got some really good comedy actors from LA, like Nick Gligger. I have a great editor that was in comedy, Jessica Rose Felix.
Hmm.
And then outside of the voice, and I should say Elijah Schaefer, who's in Ohio, and I have roots in Ohio, so kind of made that connection with that actor.
Hmm.
But then I knew I needed a dynamic soundtrack because my background before animating was actually music.
Okay.
So I worked, I set up a meeting with Chopper Franklin, who's in Heathen Apostles, and he also was at one time in the Cramps.
Okay. Yeah,
So
yeah, I know the Grams.
yeah, great band.
Great
Heathen
band.
Apostles, in my opinion, even awesome, even greater. So they're doing like a sort of a rockabilly with Western
Mhm.
aesthetic, and it's fun. So they did the soundtrack for it, and had them do the bits and pieces throughout the show. And then after that, once I had something complete for that first pilot, was a matter of how do I put this out there? I don't want to put it on something like just YouTube because it's saturated, and it's great to kind of for me to build something on YouTube, like in parts, but the actual then finished product, I didn't want it just on YouTube. So, um, that's when I looked at distributors, and there's a distributor called Bitmax that will pitch the show to different platforms, and that's the challenging part. If you're doing
Mhm.
it by yourself, is you need to have precise um, things that a upper tier streaming service are looking for. So if you have, for instance, I used crickets in my first episode, and with
Mhm.
crickets in the background, there's a little bit of noise, right?
Sure.
Well, obviously, a high streaming service like I don't know, like Hulu or something, wouldn't necessarily want that noise in the background. So either you have
Right,
to
right.
cut it, or you have to, and by that time I had a finished product, and so going back and then changing things was not what I wanted to do. Same with like Netflix. I mean, these are avenues that you could go down, but you need to
Mhm.
make sure that you have everything in place at your studio. And for us, we actually, being in like the North Hollywood area,
Mhm.
we have to deal with a lot of planes going over us. So when we're recording, and we're recording
Okay.
in our house, right? So every 5 minutes we have a plane, so we have to stop
Right, right.
the voiceover, and then we have to, wait for the plane to go over. And that was really problematic as we were trying to figure things out from the first couple episodes. And then that's when I got an isolation booth, and then
Okay.
that has helped um, cut down on a lot of that noise. We still have, when the house shakes because of a plane going over,
Right.
that's really not good. But then, they pitched it to like the secondary streaming services like Tubi,
Hmm.
Amazon Prime, and others, and Zumo, and they were interested. what's great about Tubi is that they have like such a huge catalog of animated shows as it is.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm familiar with Tubi.
Yeah, and I like that it's free too.
Sure.
So, you might have to deal with advertisements, but this is going to reach more people. And I like that idea.
So for my students who maybe have their own thing, when you say pitch, did you just kind of cold email them or cold call them, or how was your process?
So the good news is that the distributor actually does that work for
Oh,
you,
okay.
So heaven forbid that I would have to do all those cold calls. I think that there's a lot of barriers in place for
Right, right.
someone, an artist, to just start to, you know, unless you're doing something like YouTube, that's
Sure, sure.
straight shot. But there's a lot of hurdles and things in place. I had to get insurance, for instance, to make sure
Mhm.
that, if someone
Right,
tripped at the property, that it
right, right. You
insured
don't
if
get sued.
if someone said, "Hey, you used the sample" or something like that.
Right, right. Copyright
Right. So
possible
that,
infringement lawsuits.
yeah,
Yeah.
so you have to think about that kind of stuff. The
Sure.
other thing that you really have to think about is when the distributor sends the metadata data,
Hmm.
and just having everything in place, understanding all that language,
Hmm.
So it's quite a lot. But now that it's like I said, I'm now in my fourth season. The third season was just released on Tubi on the first, actually, so yesterday. So yeah, it's a gradual process. I'm more of like that slow train that likes to chug along and get the work done.
Hmm.
There's probably much faster approaches, and if you have a lot of money, maybe it's even better for you. But I did not have a lot of money going into this, but look where it's taken me, just with patience and the grit to make it happen. I work a full-time job, a lot of people, a lot of artists do, so
Sure.
it's finding that time to animate. And I'm not someone that, has either the luxury or the money to send out my work to someone else to do it.
Right, right. Outsource it.
Yes, but that can work too. So yeah, I think that let's see. Yeah. And then as far as the marketing, it's marketing side of things is just, trying to think of new angles and being all around social media that you can, being all on the Reddits and things like that to promote it. But like with Tubi, it's in 3 different countries: Australia, United States, actually Canada, and the UK.
Right.
You could expand that if you do more with languages, of course.
Hmm.
Um,
Sure.
but yeah, for the artist that wants to kind of do what I'm doing, it'll take time and it'll take a learning curve, but you can definitely make it happen as long as you invest the time. You're having fun with it, then you're going to want to continue doing it.
Sure. Um, so what have you kind of learned, so since it's a very small operation, right? And
Mhm.
I'm assuming a lot of people I talk to, they work at a studio where it's like they do commercial work and they're doing different projects. You're really sort of doing this one project, right? So do you feel
Yep.
like through your experience of animating the various seasons that you sort of, do you feel like you've learned anything or gotten better at anything or
Well, I'll say though too is that I didn't want to sell the product. There are people that would want to do that, and
Hmm.
that's how they can
You
make
mean
money.
sell the rights to it?
Yeah,
Is it?
sell the
Yeah,
rights.
yeah.
You could go
So
on
I'm once
to,
again, it's for my students who may not know what sell.
yeah.
So just
And
for my students, what selling the rights would mean is currently, Mr. Morgan Richards owns the rights to the Goodbye Family, which is his animation. If he were to sell those rights to a company, he might still be put on the project, but he doesn't own it.
yeah,
And this is what happened a lot with a lot of, properties where Disney might own a property, you get to work on it, but at the end of the day, Disney gets to sort of call the shots, or Warner Brothers, or whoever the studio might, the larger parent company might be.
yeah,
So what he's saying is he owns it. He gets to make decisions about what happens to it.
in perpetuity. And I had at one time checked out something like Comedy Central, and so the
Mhm.
arrangement was that you do a pitch to them. It's like up to 5 minutes, but you're among a panel, and
Sure.
they sort of decide, well, is this something that they want? And then you could lose your rights to it, right? So
Right,
they
right.
just take it over at that point. And that's not what I wanted. I wanted to see this into my old age, doing
Sure.
comics, going to festivals, meeting people, stuff like that, So, but as far as other things that I've learned is, for instance, just attending the Beverly Hills Film Festival and what that can do and how that can spread more awareness of your work
Mhm.
was great. What I also noticed while I was attending that is how much AI is involved with creators' work. I'd say
Mhm.
half of what I saw within the animation segment was AI. And I
Mhm.
don't want to criticize, but some of the AI was like, you see like extra fingers on people and back
Yeah, it's
foot movements and things like that that were really out of place.
I must admit, like when I haven't done a deep dive in at least into as an artist, obviously AI is a thing to consider and be pro or against in various situations. The one thing about AI that I've noticed is it has a very specific style. I actually was looking at I was looking, at a hiring an HVAC person, and it's like, all their pictures, I'm like, oh, that's clearly AI. It's like it has a certain style where it's just like
Mhm.
in the same way, like, 60s US cartoons has a style or like 80s
Right.
anime.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that is the quote unquote, what I call it, the AI style. It has this very vague 3D, like kind of realistic, kind of not. And it's like, I'm not necessarily saying that's bad per se, but it becomes like, all right, well, if everything becomes that, it's kind of like how in early 2000s there was a Flash style, right? And it's like
Mhm.
everything had this very, you know, you look at it and go, that was made with Flash, just because it's just there's certain qualities about it that like, and it's neither good or bad, it just kind of is. And it's just kind of interesting that we're kind of, I mean, I guess it's always
Well, Disney has the big eyes, right? All their
yeah, yeah.
characters
But
have
yeah, so that's interesting what you're saying.
big. Um, but that also the thing is with AI is use it to your advantage, but don't let it be the content creator, right?
Sure, sure.
And I think that that's what actually was happening with some of these films that I was watching is that you didn't see the artist within it. It
Right,
was
yeah. It
it was
becomes very well, I felt that way, I felt like in early 2000s there was kind of a backlash to and into the early 10s there was a backlash against kind of the Pixar style, which was
Mm,
very, by definition 3D is kind of very smooth, and everything's like
yeah.
very deliberate. And not to say that's good or bad, it just kind of is what it is. But
Mhm.
in the early 2000s, there was kind of this return of like wanting those sort of organic pops and like, the sort of hipster love of like stop motion, where it's like it's never
Yeah.
going to be as smooth as a 3D Pixar type movie. It's not meant to be, but kind of that love of the mistake or the organic or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. And
I hear you on that.
a couple of years back, when it was in I think it was start of the second season of The Goodbye Family, it did win an award, top 10 best animated shows, and it was put out by the New Yorker, Vulture
Mhm.
magazine. So that was a big deal for me because here I'm competing with large studios, and we have like 5 people working on this.
Mhm.
So it's just amazing to see that other people appreciated something different, something
Mhm.
that was organic, gritty, and had aesthetics that, were different than that clean, smooth uh, thing that all the big companies use.
Right. So do you have, do you see yourself moving on to another project, or is this kind of where you
Yeah.
want to be with your animation? Right. I
Yeah,
mean, like obviously, I'm sure you want to do more seasons or whatever, but
of course, yeah.
do you see yourself wanting to sort of move into a different topic or a different set of characters or something? Or
Well, that's really with the short films. So, Poor Eldon was my first, and
Mhm.
this is the next one I'm going to start working on is the decline and fall of Holly Dew and Walter Mellon. And this is a story about Hollywood and
Mhm.
those that make it and those that don't. It's going to be sort of a dark comedy,
Okay.
and I plan to put that through the film festivals as well. Um, and my end goal is to have these short films kind of packaged together in a series that then is brought to streaming services as also.
Great.
Yeah.
Um, One question I always sort of ask people, where do you see animation going as in general? I mean,
Well,
it's
you gotta, yeah.
changing both in terms of like style, but also like distribution, right? So
Mhm.
how do you feel about the future of animation?
Mm. Well, I was one of I think 16,000 that have been affected by AI copying
Oh, okay.
um, my art. There is a lawsuit that they're trying to build for that.
Mhm.
So that that's kind of sad that
Right.
AI is doing that in general.
Yeah, that's not cool.
Yeah. And I don't know where that will lead. It'll probably be similar to music, where Napster was around, if anyone remembers that.
Sure.
And that kind of led to the music industry folding, right?
Right.
And then something new coming up. The musicians didn't die, right? The
Right.
musicians continued on by touring. So, we do have services like YouTube that are oversaturated, and now AI is sort of finding themselves there. And there's other services like YouTube that are just
Mhm.
strictly AI, and if you ever go on something like that, it's kind of like you get really lost. So I think that we're going to go through kind of a collapse and then a Phoenix rising kind of effect where the good will come out of this. And,
Sure.
you know, I'm prepared by doing these short films to kind of carry on what my style is.
Hmm.
Um, Not everyone appreciates my style, and I get it,
Sure.
but as an artist, you gotta just stay true to yourself.
Great. Do you have any, I mean, I know you kind of were giving some of your sort of words of wisdom earlier. Do you have any sort of tips or messages for the kids, if any, or what, about
Yeah.
your what you feel or what what you've learned through this whole sort of process?
If you kind of struggle like I did early on with dyslexia or some sort of just disorganization, you really need to make
Mhm.
lists. So,
Okay.
write out what you plan to do, even if it's a far goal, put that on a list,
Mhm.
and you'll get there,
Right.
take it in stages and accept it's not going to be perfect. So,
Sure.
but outside of that, I think that, use the tools around you. Like I've been saying, AI is something different, but you can use AI to your advantage.
Sure.
Just don't let it take over your ideas and your art. Um, yeah, I think those are the two main things is just really being organized about it, taking the time, accept that you might not be as a social bird as you want to be because you're
Mhm.
going to be sitting home and you're going to be focusing on your art.
Sure.
And there's lots of hours that, I put in about 2 to 4 hours in the day to animate.
Hmm.
And when I'm doing that, then it's also taking away from writing or doing
Sure.
my comics. So
Right.
it's all a matter of like just trying to find the time to do it and appreciate that you're an artist that's here to show a gift.
Sure. Okay, great. I think I think this was really helpful for the students. We really appreciate your time and your insight on all this. So thank you very much.
Yeah, if anyone wants to reach out to me, you can go to lorinrichards.com, LORIN RICHARDS. Uh, I'd love to hear from you, and if you have any questions for me, feel free to reach out.
Great. Well, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Do
thank
you have
you.
any plugs besides your website? Do you want or obviously the know
Yeah,
about
check out the Goodbye Family. You might want to start backwards to forwards. I don't know, but just remember that the pilot is a pilot.
Sure. Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, take care. Thank you.